For over 60 years, one question has haunted rock and roll. What does the master himself actually listen to? What plays in the private rooms of the man who rewrote the rulebook for music? Bob Dylan. The voice of a generation, the poet of the counterculture, a ghost in the machine of American song. He's so mythologized that his own influences have become a kind of sacred, unknowable text. But recently, a list started making the rounds online, a whisper that became a roar. It claimed to be the final answer, the 6 bands Bob Dylan, at 84 years old, holds above all others. In a world of digital smoke and mirrors, could it possibly be real? Could the enigma be solved that easily? Today, we're not just repeating rumors. We're going to do some real musical detective work. We'll investigate the truth behind the legend and explore the profound, documented, and often turbulent relationships Dylan has had with the 6 bands that would almost certainly top any such list. We're separating the hard facts from the convenient fictions to build the ultimate picture of the sounds that shaped the man who shaped everything. Here's the thing. Asking for Bob Dylan's list of favorite bands is kind of to misunderstand Bob Dylan entirely. This isn't a man who deals in simple rankings. His whole career is a monument to constant motion, to shedding skins, to absorbing the world and refracting it back in ways nobody expects. A neat numbered list just isn't his style. In a 2022 interview with the Wall Street Journal, when asked what he was listening to, he gave a classic Dylan answer. A sprawling, eclectic mix that included everyone from 50s rockabilly star Janis Martin to Metallica, from Wu-Tang Clan to the Strokes. It was a snapshot, not a scripture. So while the viral claim of a new list is almost certainly bogus, it gives us a fascinating excuse. It forces us to comb through 6 decades of interviews, recordings, and concerts to assemble the real list. Not a list he gave us, but the one his life's work reveals. It's a list built on mutual respect, bitter rivalry, and undeniable artistic synergy. These are the 6 bands whose stories are so woven into Dylan's own that to talk about him is to talk about them. This isn't just a countdown, it's the construction of a musical Mount Rushmore, chiseled out of history, sound, and the words of the artists themselves. Let's get into it. If there's one name on this list that is completely indisputable, one connection so deep it feels less like an influence and more like a limb of the same body, it is simply the band. Their story with Dylan isn't about admiring from afar. It's a story of being forged in the same fire, of finding sanctuary together, and of creating an entirely new musical language. It all started in the mid-60s, when they were still the Hawks, a razor-sharp backing band for rockabilly, singer Ronnie Hawkins. Dylan, fresh off his electric turn at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival, needed a band that could handle the storm he was about to unleash. He needed musicians with grit, power, and a deep knowledge of American bedrock, blues, R&B, and soul. He tried to hire guitarist Robbie Robertson and drummer Levin Helm for a few shows, but they made it clear. It was all of them or none of them. Dylan hired the whole crew. What followed was the legendary 1966 World Tour, a nightly battle between an artist pushing forward and an audience trying to drag him back. Every single night, Dylan and the Hawks faced a chorus of boos and cries of "Judas" from folk purists who felt betrayed by his electric guitar. In that crucible of hostility, a powerful bond was forged. The band weren't just hired hands. They were his co-conspirators, his musical armor. They were the only other people on Earth who got what they were doing. This shared struggle led to a creative rebirth. After a 1966 motorcycle accident forced Dylan into a long recovery, he vanished from the public eye. He and the band hunkered down in a house in West Saugerties, New York, known as Big Pink. There, in the relaxed vibe of its basement, they recorded what became the Basement Tapes. These sessions were a world away from the frantic energy of the '66 tour. They were loose, playful and steeped in a kind of old weird America. They played folk songs, wrote new ones, and stripped their music down to its rustic core. This is where the band truly found their own voice. It cemented a musical relationship that was almost telepathic. They understood Dylan's quirky timing and lyrical detours, and they could follow him anywhere. The influence was a two-way street. The band, Robbie Robertson's storyteller guitar, Rick Danko's melodic bass, Richard Manuel's soulful piano, Garth Hudson's kaleidoscopic organ, and Levon Helm's uniquely funky drumming, created the perfect earthy foundation for Dylan's surrealist visions. Their interplay was a masterclass. No one overplayed. Every note served the song. Dylan, in turn, gave them the platform to become artists in their own right. His complex songwriting pushed them to create their own masterpieces like The Weight. Their time together didn't just produce classic albums like Music from Big Pink and Before the Flood. It fundamentally altered the DNA of American rock music, birthing the genre we now call Americana. Theirs was less a friendship and more a brotherhood. If the band was a brotherhood, the Beatles were the other side of the coin. A relationship, built on rivalry, fascination, and a creative feedback loop that sparked some of the biggest artistic leaps of the 20th century. Dylan and the Beatles were the twin pillars of the 60s, two colossal forces on parallel tracks. When they finally collided, they created a cultural Big Bang. Their first meeting on August 28, 1964, at the Delmonico Hotel in New York, is the stuff of legend. It's most famous for the claim that Dylan introduced the Fab Four to marijuana for the first time, supposedly because he misheard the line, "I can't hide" in "I want to hold your hand as I get high." But the real significance was the artistic cross-pollination that followed. Before meeting Dylan, the Beatles wrote brilliant but thematically simple pop songs. Dylan was the poet of the folk scene. John Lennon, especially, was captivated by the freewheelin' Bob Dylan. He saw that Dylan gave him a license to be more personal, introspective, and ambitious with his lyrics. After they met, the change in Lennon's songwriting was immediate. Songs like "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away" are a direct nod to Dylan's style. This newfound depth would blossom on albums like Rubber Soul, where songs like Norwegian, Would, and In My Life were worlds away from She Loves You. But the influence flowed just as powerfully in the other direction. Dylan had initially dismissed the Beatles' music as bubble gum, but he couldn't deny their power. He was reportedly floored by their inventiveness, saying, "They were doing things nobody was doing. Their chords were outrageous. I knew they were pointing the direction of where music had to go." The Beatles' sonic ambition showed Dylan what was possible in a studio. This realization directly fueled his own electric period. The expansive, surreal soundscapes of Bringing It All Back Home and Blonde on Blonde owe a clear debt to the path the Beatles were paving. The relationship was complex, tinged with professional jealousy. Dylan reportedly once told the Beatles, "Oh, so you don't want to be cute anymore." Lennon, for his part, felt both awe and a threat, once describing being in a room with Dylan as watching two tigers prowling for supremacy. He even famously renounced his belief in Zimmerman in his song God, a sign of just how large Dylan loomed. Yet, this rivalry was always underpinned by deep respect. They were the only ones who truly understood the pressure of their shared stratosphere, constantly raising the bar for each other and, in doing so, elevating all of popular music. While Dylan's relationship with the Beatles was a dance of poetry and pop, his connection to the Rolling Stones was grittier, forged in the shared DNA of American blues and a mutual love for rock and roll's raw, rebellious heart. If the Beatles were the brilliant innovators in the studio, the Stones were the swaggering lifers on the sticky-floored stage, and Dylan deeply respected their authenticity. Dylan has been unequivocal in his praise. There's a widely circulated quote where he supposedly said, "The Rolling Stones are truly the greatest rock and roll band in the world and always will be. The last two, you can trace it all back to the Rolling Stones. They were the first and the last, and no one's ever done it better. While the exact source of that quote is a bit murky, it perfectly captures his documented admiration for the band. In the early 60s, both Dylan and the Stones were drinking from the same well, the raw blues of artists like Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry. The Rolling Stones famously took their name from a Muddy Waters song, while Dylan's own Like a Rolling Stone was written independently, drawing on that same blues language. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards saw in Dylan a new kind of songwriter, one who could infuse rock with a literary consciousness. You can hear his influence in their late 60s work. A song like Jigsaw Puzzle from Beggar's Banquet has a sprawling, Dylan-esque narrative structure that feels heavily indebted to his character-driven epics. The respect was mutual. Keith Richards has said he'd work with Dylan anywhere, even in hell or heaven, because he loves him. Dylan, for his part, has praised Stones songs like Wild Horses and Angie. There was also a healthy competition. A famous, though possibly untrue, story claims Dylan told Jagger he could have written I Can't Get No Satisfaction, but Jagger could never have written Like a Rolling Stone. Jagger supposedly quipped he'd like to hear Dylan try to sing Satisfaction. They were looking for material, and as McGuinn later said, Dylan's songs were simply the best around. Their big breakthrough came with their cover of Mr. Tambourine Man. Before they recorded it, Dylan visited a rehearsal. McGuinn remembers Dylan's reaction. "Wow, you can dance to it, man." The Byrds had taken his acoustic folk anthem and given it a beat, angelic harmonies, and that iconic jangling guitar. The result was a revelation. In June of 1965, the Byrds version hit #1 in both the US and the UK, a feat Dylan himself hadn't managed yet with a single. Suddenly, Dylan's poetry was pouring out of every car radio in America. This created a perfect symbiotic relationship. The Byrds had major hits with several of Dylan's songs, acting as his ambassadors to the pop charts and making him a ton of money in royalties. They were his Trojan horse, smuggling his revolutionary ideas into the heart of the pop establishment. So what did Dylan think? He was all for it. He understood the Byrds weren't just covering his songs, they were interpreting them. More importantly, their success gave him a proof of concept. It showed there was a massive audience for this hybrid sound, giving him even more confidence to push forward with his own electric albums like Highway 61 Revisited. You can hear the influence of the Byrds' bright, chiming guitars all over. His own mid-60s records. Roger McGuinn's unique 12-string guitar style was key. He adapted banjo-picking techniques to the guitar, creating a fresh, cascading sound that would be copied by countless bands, from Tom Petty to REM. The Byrds were more than a cover band. They were essential collaborators who helped build the very stage for Dylan's electric persona. They were the messengers who proved that poetry could be pop and that folk could rock. The relationship between Bob Dylan and the Grateful Dead is one of the most fascinating and spiritually aligned in all of music. It was a union of two American counterculture icons, Dylan, the solitary poet, and the Dead, the communal improvisational pilgrims. Their connection wasn't about hit records. It was about a shared dedication to the song as a living, breathing thing. Their paths crossed for years, but their collaboration really blossomed in the mid-'80s. At the time, Dylan was in a creative slump, struggling to connect with his own vast catalog. The Grateful Dead, meanwhile, had built an entire culture around reinterpreting songs. In 1986, Dylan toured with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, sharing a bill with the Dead for several stadium shows and even sitting in with them. This led to the legendary 1987 Dylan and the Dead tour. For 6 shows, the Grateful Dead became Dylan's backing band. Rehearsing with them was a revelation for Dylan. Jerry Garcia and the band knew his songs as well as he did, maybe even better at that point. They pushed him to dig up obscure tracks he hadn't played in years, and their improvisational approach forced him to re-engage with his own material. Many say the Dead basically taught Bob Dylan how to play Bob Dylan songs again. The tour was a pivotal moment. It revitalized him as a performer and is seen as the creative spark for his never-ending tour, which began the next year and continues to this day. The live album from that tour, Dylan and the Dead, is often criticized for Dylan's vocal performance, but to judge the collaboration on that record is to miss the point. The real magic was live, in the fusion of Dylan's songwriting with the Dead's free-flowing musicianship. They understood the cosmic folkloric roots of his music. There's even a persistent rumor that Dylan asked to officially join the Grateful Dead. Whether it's true or not, it speaks volumes about the kinship he felt. In the Dead, he saw fellow travelers on the same long, strange trip, dedicated to exploring the endless possibilities within traditional song. Their collaboration was a summit meeting that helped Dylan rediscover the joy in his own music and set the stage for the final, triumphant act of his career. Of all the names on this list, maybe the most surprising, the one that breaks the classic. Rock Mold is The Clash. This connection reveals something crucial about Dylan: his unwavering love for rebellion, raw energy, and music that confronts the world head-on. First, let's clear the air and debunk some myths. For years, fake stories have circulated. A made-up 1984 Rolling Stone interview where Dylan praised them, a claim that he covered London Calling live, an anecdote that bassist Paul Simonon played on a Dylan album. None of it is true. The real story, though, is far more interesting. Dylan's admiration for The Clash is real, and he documented it himself in his 2022 book, The Philosophy of Modern Song. In it, he discusses the punk movement and specifically names The Clash, placing them in the continuum of vital revolutionary rock and roll. His interest in punk makes total sense. From his earliest protest songs to his defiant electric tour, Dylan has always been a punk at heart. What did he see in The Clash? He saw a band carrying the torch. Their job was to question authority and give voice to the dispossessed. While their sound was a world away, their energy was the same. The Clash's ferocious political anthems were the 70s version of Dylan's 60s finger-pointing songs. In Joe Strummer, Dylan would have recognized a fellow street poet who knew music could be more than entertainment. It could be a weapon. Like Dylan, The Clash were musical synthesists, blending rock with reggae, funk, and dub. Dylan, who has spent his career drawing from folk traditions all over the world, would have respected their musical curiosity. While he might not have been at their shows, his documented appreciation for The Clash shows he's always been connected to the rebellious spirit of youth. They were his spiritual descendants, taking the confrontational energy he first unleashed and cranking the amps to 10 for a new generation. So, after all this, do we have the definitive list? Did Bob Dylan finally reveal his 6 favorite bands? The answer is no, because a list like that probably doesn't exist for him. Bob Dylan's favorites aren't a static collection of names. They're a living ecosystem of influences that's always expanding. The 6 bands we've explored, the Band, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Byrds, the Grateful Dead, and the Clash, are the foundational pillars of his musical world. They were his brothers, rivals, messengers, fellow travelers, and spiritual children. But to stop there would miss the bigger point. As his recent interviews show, Dylan's curiosity is boundless. He talks about seeing Metallica, his admiration for Eminem and Wu-Tang Clan, and enjoying modern artists like The Strokes and Jack White. This is not a man living in the past. He is, as always, a voracious listener. The true list of Bob Dylan's favorite bands is his own discography. It's all in there: the rustic soul of the Band, the harmonic genius of the Beatles, the raw power of the Stones, the jangle of the Byrds, the freedom of the Dead, and the rebellious spirit of the Clash. His music is the ultimate synthesis, where all these influences converge and are reborn as something uniquely Dylan. So what's the big takeaway from all this? The quest for A simple list tells us more about our need for certainty than it does about him. We want to pin down the enigma, to finally get the key that unlocks the mystery. But Dylan never deals in easy answers. His legacy isn't one of static pronouncements, it's one of perpetual motion. He is a river, not a monument. Exploring his connections to these 6 incredible bands gives us a deeper appreciation for his genius as a synthesizer. He is rock and roll's great filter, absorbing everything from Appalachian folk to British punk and channeling it into his singular vision. He taught the Beatles depth, and they taught him sonic ambition. He found brotherhood with the band and a spiritual kinship with the Grateful Dead. He saw his poetry take flight with the Byrds and his rebellious spirit mirrored in the Stones and The Clash. But that's just our conclusion. What do you think? Who belongs on Dylan's musical Mount Rushmore? Are there any bands we missed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The debate is half the fun. And if you enjoyed this deep dive that separated fact from fiction, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You'll never miss a story. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the mind and music of Bob Dylan. Until next time, keep listening.